Hi. You know, today I just decided to kind of get on now. It's a kind of a cloudy, but it's turning to be a sunny day in Southern California. But I just felt like the urge to like put an end to some of the speculation that I don't know why. Um, I think we have so many things going on in our life that when we think about other people, if we do it from a perspective where we want to learn how their story impacts ours and how they got through certain things, then that's a wonderful way to go forward. But if we're just looking to gossip, then I think that's just ridiculous. But there's so much a bad PR that I've gotten and stuff. And so I don't know why I just woke up this morning and I said, I'm going to put an end to this speculation. I'm just going to like go and just put it all out there. And so for whoever wants to hear that, anyway, that's what I'm going to do. And so, and the question is, the question in my mind is, if life is to be joyful and joy-filled and abundant, why are so many of us, and maybe some of us, and many of us, and most of us, and okay, maybe all of us, why do we experience so much hardship and pain? I mean, it just seems so counterintuitive because we're on planet Earth. We are one of the lucky ones. We are one of the chosen ones who are blessed with this incarnation on this beautiful planet. And so, but we are children, spiritually speaking, and so we have a lot of issues to kind of clear. And so sometimes it really boggles my mind. It's beyond my comprehension why we are to experience so many issues and situations and people that push our buttons. Do you feel that way too? And they push us to the limit where we feel like we have no option but to really to face ourselves. And I guess that's the point of it all. We have to begin to look within. And so to learn and to grow beyond who we were yesterday or before these situations arose. And so, in other words, it's almost like learning to face our karma and then to clear it. And that's why we're here. That truly is what I believe is the reason why we're here. It's just to expand our soul and to become more of who we are as love, as beings of love and light and goodness and kindness and benevolence and truth and justice and all the wonderful things that are the good attributes for human beings and for all beings, and God only knows all the other beings in other dimensions and in other galaxies and in other planetary systems and whatever. Anyway, we're here to grow. And so my story seems to be like an extreme example of that. Like, what am I doing here? But, life is not to be stagnant. And even the Neanderthals in caves, much less those in our life. That was kind of funny, wasn't it? But anyway, the Neanderthals in our life, yeah. Even they ventured into the unknown to face unforeseen obstacles, right? So they didn't just sit in their cave. They went out into the world and they had issues to overcome so that they wouldn't perish. And so the key is not only to survive this lifetime, but actually to thrive as we face situations where the lessons keep repeating once we haven't learned them. But once we have learned them, then we're on to bigger and better lessons. And the lessons that we keep repeating, even though it looks like we're not repeating, because the people have different faces, they have different ethnicities, they have their different ages, the issues seem to be different. They have different bodies. They have the same wounds, the same deep inner wounds. And so we can see them as, we can say, oh my God, they're just crazy. Oh my gosh, they're just narcissists. I mean, that's what's all over the internet nowadays, right? Is the narcissists. They're manipulative, they're abusive, they're controlling, they're argumentative. They cheat, they lie, they steal. Oh my gosh, it's just all of those above. And so we can fall victim to it because we know that when an issue whatever issue we resist persists. And so we have to kind of go through it and face it, and then let it go. So there's no point in resisting something, because it will just come back to haunt us even more. So we're given opportunities to set boundaries, and I think that's the key in life. Is we have to know who we are, and we have to love ourselves, and we have to have boundaries, and not let people cross them. Otherwise we just become doormats. And so the lesson is for us to move on and to become better versions of ourselves, right? But if we stay in like abusive relationships because of our insecurities, then there's pain, there's betrayal, there's loss of self-esteem. We're in a victim mentality. We try to excuse dysfunctional behaviors, and then we ourselves embody some of those, take on those dysfunctional behaviors. There's overeating and oversipping, that line, over shopping, over sexing, over texting, over whatever. Anyway, it's kind of crossing the line between healthy and unhealthy behaviors. So it's like a test, It's like when we go to the DMV and we need to take a driver's test. If we haven't read the material, then we're going to flunk. But if we read the material, then we have a better chance of passing that test. And so that's what life is about as well. So we need to, answer the right questions and then pass, and not repeat the lesson on this game of life on planet Earth, So how's that working for you? I know for the longest time, I didn't have a clue about repeating lessons. I just thought I was just attracting the same kind of people. But really, we do attract the same kind of people, but it's really for us, because we need to learn the lesson. And just like they attracted us, because they need to learn the lesson that we teach them as well. So it's kind of like we just are in this broken record of going round and round and round, in the same situations and the same people, but we know that we're here to help others and they're here to help us, because there's that reciprocal agreement where our souls recognize one another. And so, when you can walk into a room and you know exactly who you want to talk to and who you really don't want to talk to. Yeah, and so it's kind of that energetic interplay. But every morning when we awaken, we can think of what situations we're going to have that day and how we're going to respond. And we're going to do it better than we did the day before. And then how we do today will determine what we have to face tomorrow, too. So the better we do today, the more we learn about ourselves and to love ourselves, then the easier it gets tomorrow. So we want to respond in a way that's best for us to become the best person we can be. So it's kind of like that chunk of coal, that polishes into a diamond. And so the more weathering we get, then the more polished we become, and the easier life is for us. Let's see, what else? And we are here for a reason, because our soul is here. We've incarnated for a reason. And so if it weren't that we had something very special to give the world, another soul would have taken our place and we would not be here. So rejoice in every single day and know that you have something to contribute to the world. And that's why you're here. That's why, you are breathing today. And so, because you are a blessed one. And so you are here to help others, So anyway, in terms of my story, I realized that things kept escalating. The more I just tried to suppress them, and because I wasn't learning the lesson, I was just going round and round and round, like so many of us, But it really is about facing the darkness in our lives, the dark people, the dark places, the dark situations that we saw going on around us. But for me at least, I was just tired. I mean, I was just so beaten down. I was spent. I lost my courage. At one point I was really ready to rock and roll. But then after a while, it's like the same thing over and over, and you're like, I don't want to do this anymore. This is ridiculous. So we have to. Those are the times when we have to really stay strong. And so I grew up in a very loving and loved environment where I was comforted and protected, and everything was wonderful, and everybody loved me and I loved them, and it was really sweet. But then I became a woman, and bam, the boogeyman came out of nowhere. I was like, oh my gosh, maybe they had always been there, but I just never saw they were coming. And then to add to that, it was like everyone in my life kind of disappeared. They either died or they moved, or they, for some reason or another, our paths no longer crossed. And so then I was left all alone, and I was like, oh my gosh, now what do I do? And so I had to remember, when I was faced with what I saw to be darkness, that I had to remember the yin and the yang, because in the light there's a speck of the dark, and in the dark there's always a speck of the light. And so I had to learn not to see everything through rose-colored glasses, which is, I was so enamored with spirituality, and everything was love and light, and I thought, oh yes, everything's wonderful, and everyone is wonderful. But you know what? Let's see about that. Okay, and everything is wonderful, but you know what? What I didn't do was think that I was so wonderful. And that's the lesson here on planet Earth, is self-love, is to know that we have to stand up for ourselves, and we have to love ourselves before we can love anybody else. I guess I always thought from my Greek ancestors, it was like the martyrs, and, do everything for everybody else. Well, that's just crazy, because you can't do anything unless you are filled and unless you are whole. The whole Jerry Maguire, you complete me. Well, that's a movie, but you have to complete yourself. And then when you complete yourself, then you can come together with someone else who's completed themselves too. So every experience we have on planet Earth is an experience, there's a reason for it. We don't understand it initially, and maybe even at the end of that lesson. And if we don't understand it, then it just keeps repeating. But every experience is significant. And so I'll tell you, like, my story. So when I was 16, my parents took me to this big black tie gala in Chicago, and I met a boy. And I wasn't impressed. I wasn't interested. And then I went to Northwestern, and my very first day on campus, I was invited to a frat party. So Northwestern has a lot of fraternities. Some schools do and some schools don't, but Northwestern is a big Greek school. So I was invited to this frat party, and all of a sudden this guy, he kind of comes tumbling down the stairs practically. He was really drunk and God only knows what else. Anyway, so he came running down the stairs to greet me, and he kept tripping. And it was the same guy that I met when I was 16. Anyway, I was not impressed, and I was not interested. And then I took an art history class. And so guess who came and sat down next to me? And so not impressed, not interested, So he then would show up at my dorm room, and, sometimes he didn't show up for class, so he wanted my notes. So not impressed, not interested. And one day I was in the student union. It's called Norris Center in Evanston. And so there's a big staircase. And so either I was going down or I was going up, and anyway, he was going the other way. And so, I think I just kind of waved or something and said, okay, and then left. And he started screaming, and he started saying, Maria Haiti, I'm going to marry you, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh my God, like, he's really crazy. And so I was dating Mr. Wonderful, and the last thing I needed was, it wasn't even like a good kind of Pretty Woman scene, where it's like, oh, I love you. It was like this crazy person that I didn't even know, could barely stomach. Anyway, and he turned out to be like a stalker. And so so anyway, when I he was just always there. He would visit my neighbors. They became his friends so that he had an excuse to come and visit me. So I didn't realize that this was a lesson. And so I had unfinished karma with this person. And so he wasn't just a stalker. He was someone that I needed to deal with. And so he kept reappearing in my life. Anyway, when I finished Northwestern and I went to Indiana in Bloomington in the medical sciences, he would come to my house, and in Northwest Indiana, he'd come to my house, and I wouldn't even know it sometimes, and he got to know my parents, and he became a stockbroker at Merrill Lynch, so he started investing my father's money. So here I'm like 5 hours away and living my own life, doing research and loving what I'm doing. And here's this guy from Northwestern that's really getting involved with my family, and around the holidays would bring like carloads of gifts, and then his family started inviting my family for holidays. And I thought, this is really weird, because they lived in a Chicago suburb. And so I thought, this is really crazy. And I thought, what's going on? But it was like one jaw-dropping thing after another, because it was just ridiculous. And so, and I was dating somebody else where I was. And so anyway, he would sometimes decide to surprise me in southern Indiana, and he'd come down, and even his mother started calling me. Anyway, he'd come down. I was down there for 3 years, and he'd come down and he would like scrub my bathtub, and then he'd go to the store and he'd fill up my refrigerator with steaks, and and I was this student, so it was all good. And he'd bring flowers, and anyway, it was like a 6-year. So anyway, my program was like a 6-year program, and because I wanted an MD and a PhD, and so he got to be so close with my parents that my father then came down with him, and they said, "Oh, Maria, you're not going to spend the next 6 years studying in a lab and doing all the stuff you're doing here. Why don't you just get married? He got a job on Wall Street, move to New York, enjoy your life, have a great life. He's obsessed with you." And that was the thing. He really was obsessed with me. And so, so my father said, "I'm not going to pay for another 6 years of tuition. You're already 24. You're not going to finish till you're 30. And then what's going to happen? And, oh, you're going to be too old for grandchildren." And so anyway, my father said, "I know best for you, and you need to get married." And he is just so obsessed with you. He, promises to do anything for you. And so I thought, okay. So I really didn't want to do it, but I felt like I was backed into a corner. I didn't know how to say no to my father, because my father was paying my apartment, he was paying my tuition, he was paying everything. And so I took my research, I wrote it up as a master's thesis. I decided I was gonna, he was moving to New York, so I said, okay, well, I'll just go to med school in New York. And I just really never understood that I was really going to marry this person that I really didn't even get along with, But we had this huge wedding in Chicago. It was just, oh my gosh, flaming this and flaming that. And anyway, so then we went for a honeymoon in Hawaii. And I guess I was just so used to being a good little girl and listening to my father, who knew best, in a Greek home. Greek dads always know best. Anyway, so so we ended up moving. Oh, so the honeymoon was a disaster, and he actually said, "I wouldn't sleep with you if you were the last woman on earth." And I thought, oh, okay. And then he said, "I only married you for your father's money." And I was like, oh my gosh. Okay, well, isn't this a little late? And so anyway, I think I was just like so shocked. And so I had to like kind of let this all sink in. And then I didn't get it. So we moved to New York and we just became friends. And I was going to just go to school and then I was going to get a divorce because obviously it was not a marriage for me. But he was very angry. He was I think he didn't want the marriage any more than I did. But see, he had some secrets that I didn't know about, right? And so, I ended up leaving New York. And because I wasn't going to stay there and apply for residency and then try to get into schools there. And so I left and I ended up going back to Chicago, and I thought, okay, well, 6 years, I'm not going to start school now after this. So I said I needed a job. So I said, okay, I'll go to law school because that was 3 years. So I applied to some law schools and I got in and I started law school. And he and I were living together, but it was kind of as friends. And so so when I kept saying, I'm going to get a divorce. And so I took out student loans so he wasn't paying for my loans or my school or anything. And so I ended up starting school. And I just, when I said I was going to get a divorce, I all of a sudden wasn't feeling well. And then I started having visual issues, and I think it was the stress of being in this situation. And then they said, well, you could get really sick now. So then my parents were like, well, you're not going anywhere because he's got great insurance and you are, we don't know about your health. And so I just kind of settled into a life that wasn't right for me. But I ended up kind of buying into it, and I decided to have a baby, and I had kind of given up on my goals of having a career. Even though I did, I had I got pregnant, and I went to law school I went to night school for 6 years. So funny that it was 6 years, because the 6 years I could have had the degrees that I really wanted. But in any event, I had 3 children while I was in law school and just became a mom. And that to me was beautiful. And I knew I didn't want to practice law, but I thought the education was really phenomenal. And so I enjoyed that. Anyway, I ended up being sprayed with a pesticide when I was doing nursery school carpool after my 4th child, who was a daughter, after my little baby princess, after she was born. I was standing on the porch of a home waiting for the other children to come out so I could drive them to nursery school. And all of a sudden it was a beautiful day in May, and all of a sudden I was sopping wet. And I was like, hey, wait, what's going on? So I realized that there were trucks there, and they had a pesticide in there. And then the landscapers were going around this house spraying the trees and the bushes. Well, they didn't see me on the porch, or maybe they did. I'm not sure about that. Anyway, they doused me. And after that, for 5 years, I was really sick and had heart monitors and I had liver issues and kidney issues. I mean, I was poisoned. Went to the Mayo Clinic twice, and they said, you've been poisoned. We're not sure exactly what's going to happen with you. Either you're going to spontaneously get better, or you're going to get worse. And then we'll, treat you with chemo and whatever. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I went home and I started learning about alternative medicine and found an immunologist in New York. And anyway, that was a whole different thing. But that was a really amazing lesson, because it totally changed my life, of how I saw my life and what I would put into my temple, because we eat unconsciously and we eat so many things that don't serve us. We eat and we drink. And so anyway, I became very, very careful of my life, and with the heart monitor and all that stuff. Anyway, finally, I decided to, then one day I was in New York at the opening of a play, and with my husband, and I flew in first. I flew back to Chicago, into the northern suburbs first, and my son had been been at a Boy Scout meeting, and he had sustained, he was, I guess the kids were sitting around a campfire. Well, there were 3 boys that I guess were standing behind him, and they just started kicking him. And the Boy Scout leader was nowhere to be seen. So my son, when I went to the door of my home, my parents were there, and he was so injured. And so I said, "Oh my gosh, what happened to him?" And they said, "Oh, some kids were kicking him in the head and in the neck." And I'm like, "Oh my God." So I rushed him to the emergency room, and then we went to a rehabilitation hospital that I knew people at. And so he was diagnosed with a traumatic brain injury. And so sometimes, you know, the reason for this story is that sometimes when we are in relationships that aren't right for us, we don't have the sense to get out of it. But if it affects our children, then that's what motivates mothers and fathers to better their own lives. And so as I wanted him, he needed to have tutoring, he needed all kinds of extra help. And so when I realized that my ex-husband, well, he wasn't an ex then, but when I realized that my husband just didn't really, wasn't interested in helping our child, I knew that was the time for me to leave, that the writing was on the wall. And the writing had been on the wall, you know, for years and years before that. But when my 7th grader was in that situation, I went in, I took a plunge into the family court situation. And, you know, with more than half of all marriages ending in divorce, the family court situation is not exactly a pretty sight, right? And so for many of us who have been divorced, you know, it's so much uglier than it needs to be. And there's so much carnage in the street as a result, and there's anger and violence and sabotage and defamation. You know, people are saying things, and I realized that the medical school thing that I was supposed to do, I ended up becoming a patient. So I was on the one side of it, and then I was on the other side. So not only did I want to be a provider, but I was a patient. And then the law school thing, you know, not only was I studying law, but I ended up becoming embroiled in a divorce that lasted nearly 5 years. And there were, at one time, I think there were like 30 attorneys. I mean, it was just crazy. And so, so sometimes, you know, we flip-flop. You know, there are things to learn for both sides, and so then we can exercise compassion because we know what it's like to be on both sides. And in everything, in every negotiation, you know, we're the child, then we're the mother, we're the this, we're the that. So we learn. So I learned that, you know, in family court, women, it's easy to paint them as nuts and sluts, right? And men, it's easy to paint them as, oh, they inappropriately touched our child. So not that stuff doesn't happen, but that seems to be the script, you know, at least from my perspective, what I saw. And so, and then you see all the monitoring and the cheating and the lying and the, you know, just lots of hurting. And there's just no reason for it, just because 2 people either shouldn't have never gotten together, as in my case, but people that just have grown apart, you know? And so when people have grown apart, then why can't it just be easier to just walk away and settle things as rational human beings? Now, I did say in one of my other videos, I was apprised of the information that I think it was in Luxembourg, over 90% of all marriages end in divorce. And I think that is like unbelievable. I mean, that's just crazy. Why anybody would bother to get married in Luxembourg if those are the odds that are so against you. But anyway, that's not the way it happens. So my ex-husband, you know, we played this really game in family court that cost just a fortune. And as I would go to my courtroom, and really there were over 300 court dates. I mean, spanning 5 years. So, yeah. And there were custody trials, and then there were financial trials. And while the custody trial was going on, the money was being hidden, So it's just a game, And I'd go into my courtroom and watch this game play out, and I thought, oh, I don't want to be part of this. This is just like, it's dirty. I don't want to be part of an adversarial situation where people are just trying to hurt the other person, And as I walked through the halls of the courthouse, I would see couples I knew where, the husband would be huddled with his attorneys, and then the wife would be huddled with her attorneys, and they'd be like, like shooting daggers at each other. And these are people that had fallen in love, that was the love of their life at one point, that they got married, they had children, they have dreams, they have possessions together, they've shared their most intimate secrets and their feelings and their wishes and their desires, not to mention their bodies, so how can people like one day, just be so in love, and the next day they just are so cruel to each other? And so, yes, of course, a lot of it has to do with abandonment rage and people cheating and stealing and, not being the kind of people, the red flags all of a sudden that we didn't see before, all of a sudden show up. But in any event, my ex-husband said, you cannot leave me. You know some things about me that no one else will ever know. And so I'm like, but I don't belong here, and you don't belong here. And so he said, I'm going to take everything from you. And so I said, as long as you leave me my children, you can take the house, take everything, But he said, if that's what you want, it's the children, that's what I'm going to go after. So then that kind of spurred the whole thing. But I needed to stand up for myself. I was just too easygoing about it. I had made the mistake initially to be part of this whole, to not say, you know what, I'm just going to go to med school and I don't care what anybody says, because that's what I wanted to do. But instead, I kind of went through it all. And yet I realized that I was supposed to go through it all because I was to learn. I was to be on both sides of the medical game and of the legal game and of the marital game. And I was to see how so many other people were going through this, and it was to jolt me into saying, this is wrong. What can we do to fix this? So I went to the government, I went to the different law enforcement agencies, I went to the FBI, I went everywhere, and I said, this just doesn't make sense at all. I mean, these are people that had loved each other, and now they hate each other, and I felt that the attorneys, from my perspective, were kind of fueling it all. Attorneys love to fight. Litigators love to litigate, right? They don't want mediation. They want to go out there and be the Perry Mason or whatever. And so I thought, this is wrong. So they said, well, then tell people. And I said, who am I going to tell? And they said, tell as many people as you can, because this is what goes on in the country, throughout the country, and in fact, throughout the world. Litigation is an adversarial situation. And so I did. I went and I wrote a letter, and I showed it to my attorneys. I took it to different agencies, and they said, sure, go ahead and send it. So I did. And right away, my ex-husband sued me for defamation. He said, oh, she's lying in it. Well, when he sued me, he actually switched the letters. So it wasn't the letter I wrote. It was a different letter. But anyway, so I ended up being, having a trial, and I lost. And he ended up getting a $10 million judgment against me for defamation for a letter that I never wrote. And so I thought, oh, wow, this explains why we have so many situations within the legal system like this, because things like this can go wrong. And And how would anyone even hear about it? Because when you are the loser in a divorce, and I lost my children and my home and everything else, because his attorneys were better than mine, actually. Or maybe he said my attorneys were ending up working for him. So anyway, it doesn't really matter because I don't know the truth of it all, and I may never know the truth of it all. But I realized that that things need to be changed, and whatever I could do in that respect. And so he did say he wanted my father's money, and so he got this judgment, which basically allowed him carte blanche to come and send moving vans from Chicago to Florida and come and take my antiques, take my furniture, take everything, close all my bank accounts, do all kinds of crazy things. And so fortunately, I had a father that did have a lot of resources, and so as my ex-husband would take things, my father would buy me things. It was ridiculous. Anyway, I was dealing with that, and so my father said, well, I will protect my money. Don't worry. This is all, you are entitled to your inheritance. And so then I realized my father bought me a condo, and he said, oh, just leave there. Come to Florida and come and be with your mother and me. So I did. And that was wonderful. And then I saw my sister was actually, my father actually said, your ex-husband called your sister and wants to team up with her to get you. And I thought, well, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. And he said, just be careful. So as it turned out, my father died unexpectedly, untimely actually, and then his estate went to my mother, who was in a nursing home, and my sister controlled it all. And the reason why, because we were co-executors, but when my father saw that my ex was just trying to get my inheritance, my father took me off as co-executor. And he said, your sister knows that you were, and everything is 50-50. I have 2 girls and 2 condos and 2 everything. And so, you each get 50%. So let's see. So my mother ended up being starved to death at the hands of my sister. And I wasn't even allowed to be with her while she was dying. She lasted 17 days without a drop of water or food. And it just ripped me apart. It was as bad as losing my children. And I thought, what lesson didn't I learn? Because my ex-husband, said, I'm going to take everything from you. And he did. He accomplished that. And then my sister did that as well. And she took my parents. She took... So anyway, after my father died and then my mother died, and then the estate was in limbo. It was in my mother's hands, but my sister ended up as the executor. I went to Brazil to pray because I thought, these facts don't even matter. It has to do with a spiritual lesson. There is some lesson that I'm just not getting. Otherwise, I would not be attracting this. And so I went to Brazil to pray, and I meditated. And I would go from there to Clearwater, back and forth, Brasilia to Clearwater. And finally, when the last time I had gone there, I got a letter from the estate attorney that my sister hired, who was actually her next door neighbor and a friend of hers. So there's a little bit of conflict of interest there. But anyway, so he said, you've been written out of the will. And I said, that's ridiculous. I have a copy of it. It's in my second bedroom. It's in my office at my home, at my condo in Florida on the beach. And so he said, no, you've been written out and you have nothing. And we've changed the locks to your condo. And you have no home. You're homeless. And all of your accounts have been shut. all of your financial accounts are closed. And they ended up sending me a document which was forged. Signatures were forged. I even made a video of that where I showed the forged signatures. But and that was like a nightmare, because I had met a man while I was down there, and we decided to come back, and he was going to live in Florida with me. And so we would go back and forth, and so I was stalked, and he was stalked, and then we lost. Then the condo was, they changed the locks, so then he lost everything. I lost everything. I mean, even things like just everything, right? So my computers, my writing, because I would spend many hours every day writing. I wanted to really learn spirituality from the inside out, and so I was kind of processing everything and writing, and so things like all my baby pictures, all my children's gifts, all my children's photos, everything, everything my parents had given me. I mean, every stitch of clothing, even my panties. I mean, like everything, my toothbrushes, everything was gone, and I wasn't allowed in. And so I thought, wait, now my sister has become my ex-husband, and by this time my ex-husband had died. And but I didn't know that, and I didn't know how he died or where he died or anything. And even though when I was allowed to get Social Security for survivor benefits, they wouldn't, that death certificate supposedly is lost. And so I'm being kept from that. And they said, Social Security says, oh, if you can't give us the death certificate, you aren't entitled to benefits. And I would write and write checks and stuff to the clerk of Cook County and the Illinois Department of Public Health for the death certificate, and they'd say, we just can't find it. And it doesn't mean it's not here, but we just can't find it. And so they said, you need to know the date of death. Well, no one would tell me. And so I didn't know how to get it. And I still don't know how to get it, because I've actually hired 2 private investigators, and I don't know, they won't tell me. and so anyway, it's just too weird. But I realized that these lessons, these were my lessons. So I can't really blame anybody else, because my sister became a clone of my ex-husband, who just wanted to do everything she could to destroy me. And so she's stalking me on my phone, and this is what I've been told by others. She has a condo filled with all my antique furniture, my clothes, things that belong to me. I ended up homeless, and I ended up going to a homeless shelter and thinking, well, there's got to be a lesson in this, because as I read more and more about spirituality and realized that I was being shown the same lesson. There was some karma I needed to clear with her. There was some karma I needed to clear with him. And so what was it? So she would defame me. So she was on my phone, and when someone would call me, if a man would invite me to dinner or go to a party or do something, it was, she would then call him and tell him all these lies about me, and everybody would disappear from my life. And that was kind of how the isolation of my ex-husband, what he was doing too, because he didn't want his secrets out. And so it was easier to say I was just imagining things, or, I'm just this woman who, isn't in love with her husband anymore. And he said, oh, it's because he gained weight and is bald. Well, that had nothing to do with it. We weren't, in that kind of a sexual or romantic relationship, because he was not interested in women. And so, so anyway, I realized that my sister was a clone of my ex-husband. And so, and it was like an obsession. Otherwise, nobody would stalk anyone and have my things in their home. Because you see, when we, just like my ex-husband said, I'm going to take everything from you. And I thought, well, I can't stop you because you've got the attorneys, you know, you've hidden all the money offshore and stuff. So I'm not going to fight. I'm just not going to stoop and get into this pissing fight with all these attorneys and all these experts and everything. I mean, it's just, it was draining me of my energy. It was just, I became so depressed. It was like a nightmare. So, and then he hired a PR firm to write all these horrible stories about me. How, you know, I wrote this letter because I was so angry. Well, I wasn't angry necessarily at him. I was angry that that our situation had, that our country allowed family court to take on this this identity of destroying families. And I saw that the people that were most destroyed were the children and the spouse that lost, the spouse that didn't have the best attorney, and the spouse that was the most angry, and the spouse that was in for the kill. And so I decided that I just wasn't going to play. And so let's see now. Yes, I told you. So I told you that my ex-husband had these secrets, and my sister, I don't know about my sister. We've always been estranged. We just never got along. We just really never had anything to do with each other. We were 4 years apart. And so I just, you know, there was just not that. My friends were different from hers, and we just were totally opposite in personality. And so I realized that there was a lot of jealousy, perhaps, and I was kind of a tough act to follow. But I always embraced her, you know. When I would get something, because you know, I had a beautiful home and beautiful things and everything. So if I get something, I would get something for her. And because I wanted to be generous, I wanted to lift her up. But apparently, she didn't see it that way. She saw, maybe, I don't know what she saw. But anyway, and she ended up leaving Chicago, I think, just not to have to be reminded of me, perhaps. But I lived in a whole different place, and I really didn't have much to do with her. But, you know, I realized that as my ex-husband hired a PR firm to write horrible things about me and write good things about him, she hired a PR firm to, you know, besmirch my reputation with other people in my life. So these were identical lessons. So I cannot blame him. I cannot blame her. These were, I believe, that these were past life situations. This is karma that I needed to clear. And apparently I didn't clear it with him because I didn't have compassion at the time for a gay man feeling like he could not be a star on Wall Street unless he had the persona of a family, you know, a beautiful wife, beautiful children, beautiful home, beautiful car, beautiful this, beautiful that, you know? And so, so he was as tormented as I was. And thank God that the world has changed to the point where people can be themselves. You know, you don't have to put on that mask anymore. You don't have to pretend you're someone that you're not. You don't have to be the husband if you don't want to be the husband, you know, if you want to be somebody's wife. I mean, it's not for me to say. It's just that these were identical lessons. And I think that they were past life issues that I had with each of them, you know? And so the goal is I had to, and I'm still learning. I'll admit, I'm still learning. And I'm desperate to learn. I really want to get it, you know? I really, really want to get it. I really want to raise my vibration to the point where, you know, none of this stuff bothers me. And I've almost gotten to that point because I see the issues. Of course, I get angry when I feel like, you know, she's on my phone and she's stalking me and someone called me and then all of a sudden I never hear from them again because she calls them and she says, oh, you know, whatever she says about them. Anyway, uh, I see life from a higher perspective. I see that this is my issue, and um, my ex-husband was brought into my life so that I could clear that karma. And it was so obvious that I should have just, put my arms around him as like a sister to him and just said, I get it. I understand the torment of you, pretending to be someone you're not. And I hold compassion for you. I love you as a human being. I don't have to love you as a romantic partner because you're not. But I love you as the man that was brought into my life by my parents. And I can't get mad at my father either, because he ended up, he kind of interfered in my relationships, insisted I marry this man, and then my ex-husband kept suing my father for his money. So it was kind of like my father thought that my ex-husband would be his pit bull, because my ex-husband was, he had a mouth and he could talk anybody into anything. And so my father was kind of a very reserved physician, and he was born and raised in Greece, so he had an accent, and he just never felt like he fit into the United States, And he was a gynecologist, and so with Scott, with my ex-husband, who was just, the stockbroker, the Wall Street executive, the one that no one wanted to go up against. He was a pit bull. That pit bull ended up turning on my dad. So everybody had a lesson to learn, because when you don't go into a situation with the right intention, then it's going to come back and bite you, And so what I've learned is planet Earth is a classroom. Every day we are presented with opportunities to become better. And I thank you, because you are giving me this opportunity so that I can kind of, understand my life better. If it weren't for Facebook, if it weren't for YouTube, if it weren't for a lot of these social media things, I would just be sitting here by myself. I don't know if I'd be talking to myself, but I would be trying to understand my life. But this way, it gives me clarity to be able to explain to you, don't make my mistakes, and see your life for the beauty in it and the opportunities to grow, because that's why you're here. You're here for the expansion of your soul. And so every day people come into our life, whether it's the grocery store clerk, or whether it's the guy at the gas station, or whether it's a person on the street, or just somebody that we run into, somebody that we talk to on the phone. Every day we have an opportunity to become better and to hold compassion for the other person, because everybody on this planet is wounded in some way. Otherwise we wouldn't be here, right? We would have ascended into different dimensions. And so the fact that we are here means we have a lot of soul growth to accomplish. And so we're not to understand it, or we don't understand it, right? And we don't understand it because we are not to understand it, because it is above our ability to understand our life, But don't ever take the easy way out. Always know that you're here to expand your soul, and there's no gliding by in life. There's no shortcuts, really. Live each day to the fullest. Appreciate each day. Ignore the details. Of course, I haven't talked. My children have refused to speak to me for 15 years. And my sister, I guess they spend time with my sister. And no one wants to be with a broke mother, right? And they'd rather be with the one that has double the inheritance. But as my ex-husband said, I'll take the children from you. And my children, I guess the reason why they aren't speaking to me is, number one, because they didn't like all the publicity that the PR firm had given me, the bad publicity for the defamation verdict, which was the largest defamation verdict in the history of the country, and it was based on a false letter. I mean, so go figure. But also, because my inheritance, was coming to me, I think because she's taken it, maybe she gives them part of it. This is what I've been told. And so they don't have to wait for me to die to get my inheritance. They're just getting it directly from my sister, which I don't know if any of this is true, but, from the beginning, while I was in Brazil, I would write my sister and my oldest son, who I guess was working also in tandem with my ex-husband at the time. The three of them were strategizing on how to get my inheritance. And so as I would write them, they would never write me back. And so, she as executor has a duty to divide the estate, between all the beneficiaries. And she and I were the only two beneficiaries that I know about. But anyway, so as my ex-husband said, I'll take your children from you, so that, because I know that's what you want more than anything, even more than money and anything else. He was able to get this, horrible PR for his mother, for his wife, and so the children, were like, oh, Mom, you're such an embarrassment. So, okay, fine. I did what I had to do, and I spoke up, and people that speak up aren't exactly popular, and I don't really care. But it was my conscience. I saw too many women become alcoholics. I saw too many men being destroyed and wanting to commit suicide. I saw families being ripped apart. I saw attorneys making exorbitant amounts of money at the pain and suffering of their clients and their clients' other spouses, former spouses. I couldn't deal with it without speaking up. And so I knew at that point, when I told my attorneys, I said, I have to say something, because I knew some of those couples, and I was one of them, and I want to change things. I want to do, what can I do? I want to bring it to the attention of people. Just like when I had lost my home, when they had stolen my home, and I thought, well, what am I supposed to do? And I thought, well, she said, oh, you're homeless now. And meanwhile, I had this, luxury condo on the beach in Clearwater that filled with priceless antiques and accounts that were, several zeros. And my father had worked his whole life for that. And my grandparents, they both came from very wealthy families, my mother and my father. And so that was to come to me and my sister. And so I thought, how can this be? You don't go from, being super wealthy to being homeless. And so I thought, there's got to be a reason for it. So I went to shelters. I went to homeless shelters, and I lived in 3 of them. And I tried to get to know homeless people. And I tried to understand, how does this work? Why are they homeless? Are they all mentally ill and drug addicted? And what I found out is that they weren't. Some were, absolutely, but some had just fallen on hard times. Some lost their jobs. Some were in divorce, had lost their assets in divorce. They weren't the controlling ones of the money, or they were paying so much in child support that some of the men, just couldn't handle it. So there's so much more to life than what we see. And my time in homeless shelters, I was asked to leave the 3rd homeless shelter, though, because I started making a video on the homeless. And I wanted to raise awareness about the homeless. So see, when I speak out, I guess I just get slammed, or at least I did for the divorce, and I did for the homeless thing. And then with the now stealing my inheritance, it's just crazy. But I have to do, life here on this planet is short, and we need to do what burns in our heart. And if I could help one person, if I can help one person going through divorce see things differently, that would be my greatest gift. Um, the gift for me. If I could help homeless, if I have a huge inheritance coming, and I kept thinking, wow, I would use that money to build shelters. I would use that money to help people, and especially, and dogs actually have such a oh such a place in my heart, and I know that as in physiology, we had to euthanize some dogs. We would see how different medications would affect the heart rate and the blood pressure of animals. And I had done brain research on rattlesnake brains, and also I had done some gynecological research on the placenta of, well, actually, it was the uterine horn of the Mongolian gerbil. And so animals are very precious, and I feel like I created a lot of karma because I had to sacrifice them, and it made me sick. 4 o'clock in the morning, if my gerbils were ovulating, I would have to go and perform surgery on them, and then I would look at that tissue with the electron microscope, as I did with the rattlesnake brain, and the infrared system of the rattlesnake brain. Anyway, so I just, everything is a lesson. We just as those poor animals needed my help, I would use what I wanted to do is go to all the shelters and get the dogs, mainly the large dogs, because they're the first on the euthanized list. And I would want to build, have like a ranch or something and have like 100 dogs, and compartmentalize them slightly so that it wasn't just a zoo there, but to save people. And just like those animals in shelters need saving, our children need saving, our wives need saving, our husbands need saving, our families need saving. Everyone is in a situation on this planet for a reason, and they have lessons to learn. And much of it, I believe, has to do with compassion and loving the other person. And so, just as I didn't learn the lesson with Scott George, I needed to learn the lesson. I didn't learn it with my sister, apparently, because she's still doing whatever it is she's doing. And so, and I want to make it right. I'm just not sure how to do that. I do have compassion for her. I think it's wrong to steal my things. I think it's disgusting, actually. But then I couldn't live 30 seconds in a body where I was doing that to someone else. But everyone has their own lessons to learn. This is a planet of choice, and karma is real. Karma is our conscience, and karma is Newton's third law of physics. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction, and so whatever we do comes back on us. And I have to say, this was just a real eye-opener for me, which is that we may think we get away with things, but we don't understand that actually that's the energy that we put out will come back on us, but we just don't see the correlation, because we don't see that maybe that illness that we get a few years later, or maybe that job loss that we get, or maybe that boyfriend that cheats because we cheated, or whatever, or if we took something, then someone's going to take from us. And we just don't see the correlation. And human beings generally don't. What do they say? Oh, it's bad luck. Or, oh, they did that to me. Well, why did they pick you? And why did they do that to you? Because maybe it was something you did to someone else. Or maybe you did it to them in a past life. I mean, it's just, life is so fascinating. It's so when we are aware, when we're self-aware of our behavior and we're self-aware of our impact on others, then we can really change that behavior, and we can have compassion for ourselves, and we can love ourselves, and we can love the other person, given whatever limitations they have in their own personalities. So there are synchronicities in all over the place, left, right, and center, and it's important to pay attention to the signs, because we are living in a world that is alive. I mean, the atoms, the molecules, everything is in motion, whether or not it's this desk, this hard desk, or whether or not it's a living human being. Everything is animated. There is life in everything, and there is a God spark in even those dark demonic people that have been in our lives. Perhaps they're doing the best they can given their limitations and the lessons that they need to learn for their own personal transformation. So that's okay. And how we treat others, how we treat animals, how we even treat plants. Plants are alive, And so what do we do at the slaughterhouses? How do we treat those animals that are about to be slaughtered? And how do we treat ourselves? Because how do we treat our own bodies, our temples? Do we feed it organic food? Do we take care of it? Do we get enough sleep? Do we drink enough water? Do we take our vitamins? Do we love ourselves? And do we see others in the spirit of community and in love and in all the wonderful things that are there? And it's kind of interesting because I think this pandemic was really, and I hate to say this, but sorry about that. I don't know if that phone call showed up, but because as far as the pandemic goes, many of us weren't able to continue the way that we were continuing. So a lot of us were forced, not me, but a lot of us were forced to be in a home with our partner, with our spouse, and learn to get along with them. Because before, maybe it was just, people, the two partners were busy working, they had independent lives, they had different groups of friends. Well, all of a sudden, they were now together with their children, with their dogs, with their animals, and they had to learn whether or not they were either going to make it work or they were going to split and separate. And either one, there's no right or wrong. It's just that they couldn't ignore the situation anymore. They couldn't really anesthetize themselves with happy hour or going here or going there or being with friends, because there were no friends around. Everything, we had to stay home. We were in lockdown. And so even that situation was really facilitated our ability to improve our lives and to take a look at our lives and to further our spirituality, actually, in the right way. And so we have so many opportunities. And so anyway, I'll end this for now. I don't know how long this has been going on, but I just wanted to say that I wish you all many, many light bulb moments of self-awareness and self-appreciation and self-love, because that's why you're here. It's to love yourself and to understand that you live in a universe that is alive, and every interaction has a meaning to it. Every situation is for your benefit. And so clear up that karma, see the wounds in others, and forgive, and take good care of yourself. So I appreciate you, and I thank you for being here, and I love you. And until next time, I look forward to seeing you again. Thank you.